I believe that the evidence shows that she didn't hit him. I've said in the past that his injuries are not consistent with being hit by a vehicle. And by the way, the Lexus taillight braking, coming in contact with a human being and not a hard surface, makes no sense to me.
I got nightmares in my head, I fear thoughts build up until I can't.
Hello and welcome to True Crime Rocket Science, the most authentic voice in true crime. Are you a rocket scientist? Well, this is your chance to prove it. As we approach the end of another year in true crime, I want to invite you to test your rocket science on a brand new case, or at least a case I'm covering for the first time on this channel. I'll be making two videos, this one to briefly present the case and essentially two contradictory scenarios, one from the prosecution, one from the defense. And then I'm going to ask you to pick a side based on your assessment. Now, the second video will be me presenting my assessment of the case, and what I want you to do is assess it yourself. So assess the case, see how well you did, so you're going to need a notebook for this, and also see what you make of your own critical thinking, or whether it needs some work and in which areas. And you could also even say, does my critical thinking need work?
Worth playing for? Yeah.
So I'm going to give you a minute to strategize and also to get your TCRS notebooks. If you don't have one, you can order one on Amazon. I'll put a link in the description. Also, before we get to this analysis, if you haven't subscribed to the channel, please do. Like, share, leave a comment. You can also hit the thanks button, and let's get started. So do you have your TCRS thinking cap on? Here we go. Almost a year ago now, John O'Keefe, a Boston police officer, was murdered. Prosecutors say Karen Reed, John's girlfriend at the time, hit her with her car and left him to die in the middle of a snowstorm. Prosecutors further allege that the two got into an argument earlier in the day. Now, in a sense, just that little piece of information should tell you quite a lot. Do you know what to do with those 3 lines of narrative? Now, before we continue, a few gears ought to already be turning in your minds. For example, the intertextual elements that should begin to sort of manifest as you begin to assess this case. In other words, you start by assessing this case on its own merits, but the question is, in what way? On its own merits, yes, but in what way specifically? And then also through other cases, but then the question arises, which other cases? And in what area specifically? Now, according to prosecutors, and this is according to ABC News, the medical examiner who performed an autopsy on O'Keefe detailed that she observed no signs of an altercation or fight from her examination, and went on to describe his right arm injuries as scratches caused by a blunt object. Now, obviously, one of the best ways, one of the best tools to determine what exactly happened to a person is the autopsy report. And has it been interpreted correctly? And so if you're thinking about injuries caused by a blunt object, could that blunt object be, for example, a car? Does a car qualify as a blunt object? Now, according to ABC News, Reed has been adamant in denying any culpability. She's been very consistent in being absolutely sure that she wasn't involved. She said, "I did not kill John O'Keefe. I've never harmed a hair on John O'Keefe's head." In terms of Reed's backstory, Reed says, according to ABC News, that she soon became part of the O'Keefe family, but their relationship also had its struggles. Reed says O'Keefe was relying more on her to take care of the kids, and that he criticized some of the decisions she made with them. Reed claims that the couple had an argument on New Year's Eve when they were away on vacation. O'Keefe became incoherently drunk and didn't come back to their room until after 3 a.m., according to Reed, leaving her to ring in the new year with O'Keefe's niece and nephew. Waterfall Bar in Canton, where they ran into Brian Albert, a fellow Boston police officer who Reed says O'Keefe looked up to. Well, that is where kind of the events start really playing out. They run into this friend of John O'Keefe. At the bar, according to Reed, O'Keefe told her that they were invited to continue hanging out at Albert's home. And then she said to him, "Can we make sure we're welcome here? Nobody extended the invite to me. I didn't hear the invite extended to you," Reed said. The couple then drove to Albert's home, and what happened next is disputed. And this is where you need to use some insight, some common sense, where you need to know certain things. Anyway, this is her account. She says, "So I pull at the foot of the driveway. It's snowing. John has no coat on. It's windy. So I drop him off. He goes up the driveway and approaches the side door. And as I see him approach the door, I look down at my phone." Reed says after about 10 minutes of waiting in the car, she became irritated that O'Keefe still hadn't gotten in touch with her. She says she then drove back to O'Keefe's home, where she continued calling him before falling asleep at around 1:30 a.m. But according to the prosecution, people inside Brian Albert's Canton home told police that O'Keefe never came inside. So she's saying she saw him go inside, and they're saying, well, he never came inside. Reed's defense disputes that claim, according to ABC News, saying their data pulled from O'Keefe's phone shows not only did he go inside, but he traveled 3 flights of stairs once in the house. Reed says that when she woke up before 5 a.m., O'Keefe still wasn't home, so she started canvassing the neighborhood. She enlisted help from O'Keefe's friend Kerry Roberts and Jennifer McCabe, the sister-in-law of Brian Albert, who was also at Albert's house the night before. The 3 women headed to Albert's home after pulling in. Reed says she saw O'Keefe's body, quote, immediately. And this is a very important thing, because this is her statement. This is what she says happened that night. And so, do you trust or believe this statement? Now, continuing with the narrative, O'Keefe was pronounced dead at the hospital. He died from blunt force trauma and hypothermia, according to the chief medical examiner. It wasn't long before Reed became the prime suspect in O'Keefe's death. Authorities say they noticed a cracked taillight after seizing Reed's SUV. So we essentially have 3 or 4 or even more scenarios here. 1, Reed intentionally murdered O'Keefe. 2, Reed accidentally killed O'Keefe. 3, someone else murdered O'Keefe. 4, there's a conspiracy either involving folks inside the house or Reed and co-conspirators, or both. Which scenario at this early stage makes the most sense to you? Now, what do you think? Should I take it further than that, or should I leave it at that for you to make an assessment? How about I take it a little bit further? I had told both Jen and Kerry that I cracked my taillight. This is Reed speaking, Karen Reed, admitting that she cracked her taillight. And I said, I just hit my car on top of everything, but I didn't look at the damage. And both women said, it's cracked, calm down, you cracked your taillight. You're okay, let's go look for John. That's according to Reed's statement. But according to police statements, McCabe told authorities that as they searched for O'Keefe, Reed stated, could I have hit him? Did I hit him? This suggests a scenario where Reed may have had a kind of murky sense that she might have done something to Keefe. Maybe she remembered a thud that she didn't think anything of the time, but then maybe realized, was that him? But if she did something, it wasn't deliberate. In other words, being drunk interfered with her mens rea, with what would have been her intentions had she been sober. And this is yet another potential scenario. When O'Keefe's body was discovered, first responders who arrived on scene claimed to have overheard Reed saying, I hit him. But Reed disputes that, telling ABC News, I said I hit him. It was preceded by a did and a question mark. What I thought could have happened was that, did I incapacitate him unwittingly somehow, and then in his drunkenness he passed out, Reed said. So here she is suggesting she's kind of suggesting her own possible involvement without knowing about it at the time. Asked about how many drinks she had at the bar that night, Reed told ABC News probably about 4, but prosecutors say that she was intoxicated after having more than twice as many drinks, about 9 drinks that night. And that then raises the question, is intoxication a factor here? And if you say yes, how? And how does it then factor into the legal aspect to this case? Still, Reed claims to ABC News it's not possible that she may have hit O'Keefe unwittingly with the SUV. Reed has been indicted on second-degree murder charges, second-degree meaning it's not premeditated. Investigators reported finding fragments of broken glass on the rear bumper on Reed's vehicle, and that a broken cocktail glass was found by what appeared to be patches of blood near O'Keefe's body. The victim, Mr. O'Keefe, is last observed on surveillance video with a cocktail glass in his right hand. Same arm that is injured, the same type of glass that is recovered from the defendant's car, prosecutors said. In court documents, the prosecution claims that Reed's blood alcohol level could have been between 0.13% and 0.29%, which is above the legal limit of 0.08. Prosecutors say that pieces of Reed's broken taillight were found on the scene the day O'Keefe's body was found. More fragments of the taillight were found the following week, according to Canton police reports, after the snow melted to reveal more at the scene. But Reed's attorney, Alan Jackson, does not believe that claim, telling ABC News the taillight pieces were planted after the fact. In other words, he is suggesting some kind of conspiracy. And what do you think? Does that make sense? Because it's one police officer and another police officer. Now, if certain gears in your mind ought to be turning and whirring and spinning, one gear should be moving very slowly. Any idea which one? Now, asked about Reed's defense, what they believe actually happened to O'Keefe after Reed dropped him off, Jackson said, I think he walked into the house. I think he was confronted. He was likely brought down to the basement. I think that confrontation got physical and he was beaten. He was beaten to a point of unconsciousness. Jackson argues that the autopsy photos of O'Keefe support his own theory and not the prosecution's claim. Meaning, he says, it looks like he's been in a fist fight and he's been beaten. He's got some defensive wound bruises on the backs of his hand. He's got this massive laceration on the back of his head. He's got a big giant gash about 2.5 inches exactly lateral, going from left to right, 2 black eyes, a cut over his right eye, a cut over his nose, Jackson said. Jackson told ABC News this was a cover-up. John was murdered inside that house. His body was placed outside. Those essentially are the two scenarios. Which makes the most sense and how? Well, now's the time to use your true crime rocket science. If you were a lawyer in this case, what would you go about presenting? What would you say to win your case? And so now is the time to pick a side. But before you do, one last piece of information. The prosecution has responded recently that there was a Google search from inside the home, and the Google search was how long to die in cold, which occurred at 2:27 a.m. and 40 seconds. What do you really think happened here? Thank you for listening. I look forward to seeing your assessments in the comments, and look out for my next video where I'll provide my assessment. If you participate in this, it'll be so much more rewarding for you, so please do that. Thank you for listening, and I'll see you guys next time.